COVID restrictions are loosening in Taiwan. Experts let us know when they think life will return to normal.
The Wall Street Journal says U.S. troops are in Taiwan. Natalie talks to military strategist Alexander Huang about what that means.
And Staś speaks with labor activist Roy Ngerng about Taiwan's minimum wage hike.
Finally, I'm going to tell you about how the world celebrated Taiwan National Day. This is Taiwan Insider.
Taiwan saw great National Day celebrations this week, and people are enjoying life more because restrictions are loosening. We're also seeing very low COVID case numbers daily. So does this mean that life is going to return back to normal soon in Taiwan? Let's see what the experts have to say.
Taiwan's recent Double 10 national holiday provided a chance to go outside for many people tired of the pandemic lifestyle. Central Epidemic Command Center Director Chen Shizhong says the current alert level has not yet been lowered, and there are 5 factors that will determine when this can happen: the number of cases of unknown origin, availability of medical resources, vaccination rates, the international pandemic situation, and public compliance with epidemic prevention measures. But can life go back to normal when these standards are met? Experts have differing opinions. The director of National Taiwan University Children's Hospital, Huang Limin, says 2 of the indicators are the most important: the number of daily cases and the vaccination rate, which must reach around 80%. Dr. Tso from Taipei Medical University says many of the indicators are too subjective, and Taiwan's biggest problem right now is the lack of large-scale screening. The coming days will show if Taiwan will get as lucky after the Double 10 long weekend as it did following the Dragon Boat Festival and keep case numbers low. Experts say we cannot get careless, and loosening mask mandates will not be that easy. Central Epidemic Command Center expert Li Bingying says only 2 or 3 weeks of no local cases would put his mind at ease, and that mass activities over the National Day weekend could increase the risk of infection. Director Huang says that even before the vaccination rate reaches 80%, we could consider where and if people who have already gotten both vaccine doses can take off their masks. Experts agree that reaching vaccination goals and wearing masks is the best way to ensure a speedy return to normal life.
One of the biggest news of late comes from the Wall Street Journal that says there have been about 24 U.S. troops stationed in Taiwan for at least a year. Now, how significant is that? Well, I asked a top military strategist in Taiwan, Professor Alexander Huang of the Graduate Institute of International Affairs and Strategic Studies. And this is what he had to say.
So far, the report had no official response from both Taiwan and the United States government. To my personal knowledge, that we, through a foreign military sales program, that we have robust military exchanges, including high-level visit and technical level assistance. Those visiting delegation or people are small, very small in terms of size. They are here only serve as an advisor or instructor. They try to help Taiwan to improve technical capabilities to deal with different scenarios and challenges. So it cannot and should not be framed as United States stationed troops in Taiwan.
So what about the report of there being Marines and Special Ops Forces training troops in Taiwan? Do you think that's true?
Yeah, it is true. I think that the report had certain degrees of validation, but it has never been, approved that it can be shared with outside audience or media, because their work here is to teach person to person of combat skills. It's not the American stationed troops and ready to fight with Taiwan military shoulder by shoulder against someone.
Would you see it as an increased commitment by the U.S. to help Taiwan defend itself or to work with Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack?
I would say that it shows that the United States' commitment to help Taiwan defend itself.
Mm-hmm.
It does not mean that we are working or paving a way for a campaign size or theater-wide, collaboration. We are not there yet, and I do not know whether we are going toward that direction. And I would not use this case to elaborate or to imagine that in the future there will be, brigade, a division or battalion type of joint operation. And that is not the case.
I'm also curious what you think of the recent, sending of many planes from China near Taiwan. We've seen over 600 this year already, 150 the first 4 days, of October. And then we saw also President Biden speak with, President Xi and saying they have a Taiwan agreement. Tell me what you think of what this Taiwan agreement could be.
If we cut out all the so-called impossibles, and then the best that we can think of, that something that Xi Jinping promised, President Biden, as Biden during his interview saying that he would hold China accountable for a Taiwan agreement. I would say the only possible agreement, quote unquote, that I can think of that is logical for me is that Xi Jinping said that Beijing will use peaceful means to resolve the problems across the Taiwan Strait. So that's it. So when the reporters run to the President Biden and say, what's your comment on the, bombers and reconnaissance planes, fighter jets flying through the Taiwan's ADIZ? And the president naturally would say, I would hold him accountable because President Biden may remember that China had promised and agreed to use peaceful means to resolve political differences. And why are you sending so many military planes? That's how I would imagine what exactly the story was.
Professor Alexander Huang is a top military expert in Taiwan. The whole interview will be up on YouTube and Facebook.
Last week, Taiwan's labor officials announced that they were going to raise the minimum wage by about 5%. Now, that's great news for food and beverage workers, but for everyone else, it's not that big of an impact.
Taiwan's minimum wage is going to rise. That's going to help employees in the food and beverage industry, which saw major setbacks due to the ban on indoor dining that lasted over 2 months due to the COVID outbreak in May. The government has announced that it will raise the minimum wage starting January 1st, 2022. The minimum monthly salary will rise to 25,250 NT dollars, while the minimum wage per hour will increase to 168 NT dollars. But is that enough? This service sector worker says her boss says the company isn't making money, so she won't get much of a raise. This employee says it won't make much of a difference due to inflation. A survey shows most people think the minimum monthly salary should be at least 26,000 NT dollars. 1111 Job Bank spokesperson Vivi Huang says this decision will mostly affect people working in dining services, since most of them receive minimum wage. Another survey found most of Taiwan's workforce hasn't received a raise in over 3 years. For department store salespeople, it's been over 4 years. Though the government is making wage progress, most people in Taiwan are going to need more than the recent minimum wage hike to make a difference.
Staś Butler spoke with NGO worker and activist Roy Ngerng to put this latest wage hike into context.
Many cities in Taiwan have fairly high living costs, with some workers struggling to meet those costs on a minimum wage. Is Taiwan's latest rise in the minimum wage enough to help those people?
If you compare Taiwan with other advanced countries as a whole, pegged to the cost of living, Taiwan's minimum wage should actually be closer to $40,000 on average across the whole of Taiwan. So the fact that we are still seeing a minimum wage that is only about half to 60% of what is needed in terms of the minimum wage in Taiwan means that there are workers that are struggling and perhaps living in relative poverty.
I've read your work, and you have lots of these very illustrative graphs that show how the Taiwan's wages have changed over time compared to various sort of indicators of economic growth, and you kind of repeatedly point to this kind of decoupling and kind of round about the beginning of Chen Shui-bian's presidency in around about the year 2001. What are the reasons for that? Why do we see this separation of, profits in some cases and kind of workers' compensation?
I think a main part of the reason would be the economic crisis in 1997. You can see that prior to 1997, Taiwan's minimum wage and GDP per capita was actually growing faster than even South Korea. And in fact, this is something that many people in Taiwan have forgotten, that Taiwan's minimum wage and GDP per capita used to be higher than South Korea. In fact, Taiwan's minimum wage was twice as high as South Korea in the early 1990s. But this has changed, turned around, and South Korea actually has twice the minimum wage as Taiwan right now. I think it's the different economic strategies that the governments in Taiwan and South Korea adopted. While South Korea felt that it had to turn into high-value manufacturing and economic development to grow its economy, Taiwan, however, decided that it would depress costs in order to allow profits to grow. And the opening up of China in the 2000s also resulted in businesses leaving Taiwan for China to take advantage of the lower costs. So if you look at indicators by the OECD, you can actually see that South Korea has still managed to maintain a relatively high originality in terms of their innovation and radicalness as measured by the OECD, while in Taiwan, we rank quite low in both of them. I think part of the reason for this, and research has suggested that paying people higher wages would tend to enhance the level of innovation, and Taiwan might have lost that level of innovation due to the sustained low wages that have been depressed. I think there is that tendency in Taiwan now to talk about how it is not possible for Taiwan to move into higher value production. I think this is a kind of a resignation that policymakers tend to take because they do not see how it is possible to move out from this innovation stagnation to a higher value stagnation. But what I think we might be missing here is that we are adopting a low-cost model, and if we do not jump out of this model, we will not be able to see how Taiwan would therefore have the potential to tap on the current expertise in Taiwan, tech expertise, the high level of education, to then move into higher value innovation.
Next up, Leslie Liao looks at how the internet reacted to Taiwan's National Day in #Taiwan.
Last week was Taiwan's 110th birthday. Well, it wasn't exactly Taiwan's birthday, it was the birthday of the government that currently runs Taiwan. Does that make sense? Taiwan has been around much longer than 110 years. Anyway, Taiwan's National Day falls on October 10th every year. The holiday is also called Double 10 Day because October 10th is 2 10s when you write the date out numerically. Every year, on this date, there are many celebrations. There are fireworks, light shows, and performances of all kinds. But the main attraction is the president's speech, which happens on the morning of October 10th. This year, President Tsai Ing-wen's speech boiled down to 5 points. 1. Taiwan will stay resilient throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and work with other countries to fight off the disease. 2. Taiwan will continue to do its part to maintain peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. 3. Taiwan is committed to staying a free and democratic country that's not subordinate to China. 4. All parts of Taiwanese society should come together to resolve our differences. And 5, Taiwan will engage the world with confidence and pride. It was a 25-minute speech, and if you're interested in listening to it in its entirety, well, Natalie and I covered it live, and the video is still available. Link is in the video description below. Taiwan's National Day celebrations didn't just take place in Taiwan, they took place all over the world. Taiwan's various embassies and representative offices abroad hosted National Day parties to commemorate the holiday. The social media accounts for Taiwan's missions abroad shared what they did for National Day. There were parties in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, London, Paris, just all over the place. Other places opted not to arrange a party. For example, Taiwan's embassy in St. Kitts and Nevis chose to hold a beach cleanup for National Day, and Taiwan's office in Israel published a newspaper ad in the Jerusalem Post. Chicago, straight up, held a parade. Taiwan does get hyped for its own National Day, if only to share more about Taiwan with the world. But there is one country that gets hyped about how hyped Taiwan gets about its own National Day, and that country is India. A political youth organization in India celebrated Taiwan's National Day amongst themselves with a cake embroidered with Taiwan's flag. Then, India's ruling BJP put up posters around a Chinese visa application center congratulating Taiwan on its National Day, which is kind of the same stunt it pulled last year when it put up posters around the Chinese embassy. India's support for Taiwan is an extension of a controversy from last year when the Chinese embassy in India sent out a letter warning the media there about reporting on Taiwan's National Day. India construed the letter as a threat and said no. We're not only going to cover Taiwan's National Day, we're going to actively celebrate it, and that sentiment has rolled over into this year. Pro-Taiwan hashtags like #StandWithTaiwan, #Taiwan National Day, #Taiwan is a country started trending around October 10th. And of course, this picture from Taiwan Digital Diplomacy Association has been making the rounds again. It shows Taiwanese and Indian leaders Tsai Ing-wen and Narendra Modi cheersing some milk tea. That's because India is sometimes grouped together with Taiwan in the Milk Tea Alliance. Even Taiwan's Foreign Minister Joseph Wu couldn't help but give a shout out to India for all of their love this year, tweeting, "My thanks for the touching National Day messages from fellow democracies around the world, particularly those sent by friends in India. This support inspires us to keep our democracy out of the clutches of dictatorship. Taiwan will fight to the end and prevail. JW." And India's support for Taiwan is not just some one-time thing. Last year, the #Taiwan following National Day was centered entirely around India's support for Taiwan on the special day. So India and Taiwan, pretty good friends. This would be a great place to end, but there is one last thing I want to share with you that I didn't really know how to work into today's segment. But take a look at how big the Taiwan flag cake was at the Los Angeles Representative Office's party. That thing is horrendously massive. It looks like the size of 2 full-grown adults. My tax dollars went towards paying for that cake, and I'm actually kind of proud of it. #Taiwan National Day.
Before we leave you, here's a look at some of the other news stories that are on our radar.
A building fire in the southern city of Kaohsiung Thursday has left at least 7 dead and 44 in hospital as of press time. City fire department officials expect the number of casualties to rise as they comb the 13-story building for survivors. According to the village chief, the building's residential units were home to over 100 people, including many senior citizens with dementia or physical disabilities. Officials are still investigating the cause of the blaze. Taiwan celebrated its National Day on Sunday with a series of speeches and a massive parade through Taipei that involved military units, first responders, and Taiwanese heroes, including Olympic champions from this year's Games. A delegation of French senators led by Alain Richard departed Taiwan Sunday after a 5-day visit. The delegation's agenda included a meeting with President Tsai Ing-wen, who awarded Richard with a national award. Harvard University is moving its summer Chinese language program from Beijing to Taipei. The Harvard Crimson reports that the planned move comes after, quote, a perceived lack of friendliness from the host institution, Beijing Language and Culture University. Specifically, the program had issues accessing the classrooms and dorms it needed, and program participants were told that they could not celebrate U.S. Independence Day. The move to Taipei will take place in 2022.
And we're back in the studio for the final question of the day. Now, guys, you saw that giant cake at the end of hashtag?
Yeah,
Big cake.
My mind was on cake ever since. So the question that I want to pose to you at the end of today's show is, what would you choose to put in or on a cake to represent Taiwan, if not the flag?
Sounds delicious.
Stash?
Okay, I've gone, this is topical if you've watched our show before, but pizza.
What?
And I mean a very particular kind of
Okay.
pizza, which is that infamous century egg and pig's blood cake. I think nothing could capture Taiwan's unique sense of culinary inventiveness.
Sounds like overload for the senses to me.
You're gonna use up a lot of Taiwan's goodwill on the international stage.
Yeah, if the dignitaries were served that at an event.
You're asking a lot. Natalie?
Okay, I want something cute. I want our mascot, the Formosan black bear. Wouldn't that be cute?
That's my favorite animal. So
Yeah.
I can't, there's nothing I can say about that I don't love.
Yeah.
For me, I say 101/mangoes. Now, I don't mean 101 mangoes.
That's what I was going to
I mean, actually, that would be pretty topical, right? You
pretty
shove
good.
101
Delicious.
mangoes. But what I'd say was I would put mangoes inside of the cake. And that's because that's just my favorite fruit.
That is good.
I'm allergic to mangoes, but I still eat them every year.
That's commitment.
And then I would shape the cake into the shape of Taipei 101.
Hey, that would be really nice.
And that would be like on the cake,
Really
right?
nice.
So that's what I think would
Good
be
idea.
a very good representation of Taiwan in cake form.
Yeah.
Anyway, that just about does it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Leslie Liao.
I'm Staś Butler.
And I am Natalie Tso.
Make sure to follow us on social media. You can catch us on Facebook and YouTube.
And Twitter. And leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you.
Our handle is Taiwan Insider. Anyway, guys, until next week, see you around.
Bye.